Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Beitz. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. I just wanted to come on quickly and explain something, particularly to those of you who are watching on YouTube, just so that you can visualize what we talk about during this interview. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, I came across an amazing piece of light and sound technology that was invented back in 2010. And it was amazing. I had about 60 sessions under that light. And it's like a gymnasium for the brain. Helps you reduce stress, focus, just lots of different things. Definitely helps meditation. And I believe personally it helped my intuition a lot. Unfortunately, at the cost of $20,000 for that technology, it's not something that everyone can have in their own home. But today I get to talk to one of the people who've developed it further and now made it reachable for individual people. If you're on YouTube and you're watching, you can see my device here right now. It slips over your head. It's a personalized piece. Right now it retails for around $600 US, and it's designed, and for me, it is just as good as that $20,000 one that I've sat under for like 60 odd sessions over a few months. And so this is amazing. So enjoy this podcast. The information that the gentleman I interview has is just amazing. He has spent his life researching and helping to make humanity's lives better. Enjoy this one. Today we're joined by Garnet Dupuis, who was born into a humble farming family in Canada. His early years were defined by a thirst for knowledge and a profound curiosity about the world beyond his rural surroundings. His desire for learning led him to become the first in his family to attend university. After his graduation, Garnet embarked on a journey that took him across continents and cultures. He was guided by a guru in India, where he delved into spiritual exploration. He also lived in Ecuador, where he absorbed the wisdom of diverse traditions. His diverse journey through life ultimately converged with his exploration of consciousness and the advancement of neurological science. This culmination of experiences and expertise led to the creation of Neurovizr, a groundbreaking technology designed to harmonize well-being and creativity. Garnet embodies the spirit of a true explorer, a seeker of knowledge, a guardian of the wild, and a visionary who has brought forth a revolutionary tool for enhancing the human experience. Garnet, welcome to the podcast.
Well, hi, thank you. I'm not quite sure how to follow up that introduction. It sounds like a little bit of a glorified version of my life. It's true, but like everything else, there are a lot of stages between the dots. So anyway, I'm very happy to be with you. Thank you. It's a very complimentary introduction.
Sure.
I'm humbled by it. But anyway, okay, let's go.
So I'm curious. So the Neurovizr, just to let the viewers know, it's a piece of technology which you'll find out about soon. I've had one for a couple of months now, and I've used similar but different technology to it for the last few years. And I'm just curious, like, what inspired you to create it? Was there some pivotal or synchronistic moment, or is it just a evolutionary thing that happened in your life?
Well, wow, stories. I can say a couple of things that, I think many of us are a product of our time and our place. What's going on in the culture in which we were maturing has a big impact on us. And I entered university in the late 60s. And if anybody has heard any stories about what was going on in North America in the late 60s, it's like that. So it was a time of radical change. There was a sentiment that is sometimes called the counterculture at the time, the hippie thing. But to take a bigger concept, a counterculture, and then leading into what was called a human potential movement. So being a product of my time and place, it became openly attractive to pursue non-conventional aspects of lifestyle, which included, obviously, psychedelic drugs, but it was also the time when the first waves of Asian spirituality was coming into contact with Western culture. So you put those things together, you know, LSD and mantras and incredible new music and the birth control pill, and you do all of that at one time. It's a very, very fertile environment where there's more than a permission, there's an encouragement to explore what we could call consciousness. I can tell you a moment, two moments that were influential by memory, and we kind of rewrite our past. So I have to be cautious to not make this a little bit too glorified. But there's university. There's a band playing, and you know, a lot of people at the time were either smoking weed or maybe tripping, or not necessarily, but probably alcohol was always there, but it was not really the drug of choice, of course. And you know, at that time, we would try with an overhead projector that we would borrow from the media department, and you put it there, and with the overhead projector using oils and gels and plastic and food coloring to create all of this swirling, colorful, dimensional things over the band and the background all at one time. Okay, because it was seeking something, like there's something going on. Of course, a lot of this comes from the byproduct of psychedelic vision. And I remember the first time that somebody brought in and hit a strobe light. And as interesting and attractive that these swirly, aqueous color things were, when that strobe light hit, there was at least in me, probably most, an immediate shift in conscious state. There was something that happened that was so dramatic that it was, you know, unavoidable. And that sparked a very strong interest in me. And it was soon that I owned strobe lights and black lights and old antique Blu-rays and all these things. I thought, wow, there's really something here. And this is very early and primitive technology compared to what we have now. So that's a memory that I have, the shock of how a rather simplistic technology could have such a bold impact on my conscious state. Then the other, I'll admit, I mean, I don't do psychedelics now, but I had a very rich psychedelic stage earlier in my life. You know, always good for me, tricky stuff, but always good. I remember tripping, probably acid, might have been mescaline. It's not, I don't really clearly remember. There was not a big buffet of choices back then. It was either weed or hashish. There was that thing. Then you had acid, mescaline, and some psilocybin. And there was some good synthesized stuff at the time. Anyway, so I'm there, like now, with headphones, laying back on the floor in my apartment, listening to a new LP. Unfortunately, I don't remember what it was, but it was the first time that I saw the music in my mind. And you know, the consequence of the psychedelic enables that synthetic kind of crisscross that can happen. And when I saw the music, amazing colors and shapes and kind of like hieroglyphic, geometric things, I thought, wow, it was like I saw the truth in a way that I had never expected, that I saw what I heard. And that was so delightful. It was so delightful. So, you know, you can imagine how that could affect me through this day. I stopped doing psychedelics a long time ago, actually on a rooftop in Isfahan, Iran, was the last acid hit. But I decided to not use the psychedelic tools, and I wanted to use what I'll call yogic processes. So it was the year after in Iran, I was in northern India, and I began to study which was very, I could say, understandable, even fashionable at the time for a young Western hippie with a university background to study some sort of Asian tradition in India with a guru. And I did that, and I did those things, pretty seriously for 10, 12 years. And then I changed by circumstance, and I studied under a Korean Taoist teacher for another 10, 12 years, pretty serious stuff, isolated mountain meditation retreats and those things, hardcore. And then for the past 30 years, I've studied in the Tibetan Dzogchen tradition with a personal Tibetan teacher who passed away a few years ago. So, for me, it's the real deal. Consciousness, or call it spirituality or awareness, or I don't know, whatever you want to call that stuff, has been the core of my driving interests in being alive. And we're in a pretty tough space right now, I would say. I call it an age of angst, that many of the traditional spiritual approaches are not applicable anymore because they were developed at a time when people had a lot of time. If you go back, 1,000, 2,000 years, especially if you're in the temperate climates, half of the year, there's really not much you can do because of snow and ice. And during those periods without electricity, what do you do? What do you do? And these traditions developed at a time when people did not travel much. They had a strong relationship with the cycles and forces of nature. And many times they were developed without literacy, although not all, but some. So there were oral traditions and practices, and they really required or commanded quite a dedicated rhythmic process over months, if not years, to generate the gorgeous benefits that they have. Having done my best in 3 different classic traditions, Hindu, Taoist, and now Tibetan Dzogchen, it's really tricky to have the potency of these practices reach a stage of real benefit considering our current time and place. So I think that technology has always been a part of us. The shaman's drum is technology, a hide stretched over a willow frame, boom, 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 boom. And cymbals and horns, and now, Tibetan bowls. Actually, I didn't find them much in Tibet, but that this, I think it is okay, if not really good, for us to use technology in a purposeful way to help in knowing ourselves and refining our consciousness and awareness. I'm not opposed to it. Some people are seemingly against technology. I think that's probably not a very deep and appreciative view, because we use even a mandala, a tanka, a painting, that technology can just be an extension of us. I think it probably is. I know there's a lot of controversy, AI and all. So I guess this is a very long-winded way to say that the Neurovizr is my best appreciation of neurological science and the psychological and existential quest for clarity and awareness. I see it as a good tool.
Okay, and so going back to something you said a few minutes ago, that
Sure.
On LSD, you could, for the first time, you could see the music. And
Correct.
I'm curious now, with the Neurovisr, with what we see, depending on what we're listening to,
Yes.
is that what you've tried to create with the Neurovisr?
No,
or is it's
no.
quite different?
Well, it's not very different. It is different, but it has some commonality. That it's what I describe in my own thinking as the first language. That the first language, if we can imagine when, life is expressing and evolving itself. Organisms are growing. I'm not going to debate how they came in the whole thing, but when you have organisms and they're growing, the tendency is they will begin to grow with some proximity with each other. And when there's proximity, then there is the likelihood of interaction. If two things are close, then they start to interact. If they start to interact over time, they will start to have a relationship because they're interacting. Once they're interacting, then they will begin to share experience, share, you could say they begin to communicate at some level. And if they're communicating, they must have a language with which to communicate. So I think this earliest state, which is still in us now, just because it was primeval doesn't mean we've abandoned it, that I think the first language is composed of two factors: mechanical vibration, because when you have a medium, you can vibrate through it. Right now we're using mechanical vibration. We call it sound. And then there's also electromagnetic radiation that does not meet a medium. It can cross a vacuum. That's radiation, that's light. And I think that this yin and yang dance is at the heart of information processing. Mechanical vibration, electromagnetic radiation, sound, light, earth, sun. That the sun provides that solar radiation we call light. There's no sound in space because it's vacuumous, apparently. So the idea that our brains can fundamentally have rich informative experiences that are crafted by the relationship between the sun and the earth, between light and sound, vibration and radiation. I have a kind of a spiritually scientific perspective in that way. So it's not as though the Neurovizr is not meant to make you see the sound like I did, laying on the floor, but it explores the rich dimensionality of stimulation. And I think that, it's a way of knowing without thinking. It's a way of knowing without, it's not cognitive. It's neurologically, it's more of what's called a bottom-up information instead of a top-down analysis of information. I think it's really, really deep. I think it's primitive. And I think it's at the heart or brain of how we interpret what happens.
So what has been your goal? Like, when you decided to create the Neurovizr, what's been your ultimate goal there for the end user? Like, what did you want them to be able to achieve or improve or whatever in their lives?
To reduce suffering, to help. I don't know if these are the right words, but my kind of self-designated impression, I've always experienced myself as being comfortable with either teaching or healing. I think that we're all looking for something that feels special, and meanwhile we sometimes have things that hurt. And if I can help decrease the hurt and increase the special, I think I'm leading a good life by doing that. So that, the Neurovizr, I've always, Doug, we all have a personal life, right? We have a professional life, we have a social self and all these things. But I can say, again, being cautious with kind of romantic words, I've always had a relentless appetite for the divine. And maybe the word divine doesn't work for some people. Whatever that special thing, from my earliest memories, it kind kind of beckons me. I'm hungry. I'm hungry for that. And I suspect most of us are, whether we recognize it or not. And time flies. The calendar keeps on flipping pages. And here we are. And, if I can, I don't know. You get what I'm saying, that the goal is to be a good person and to try to help people. I mean, it's not very fancy. And right now, because I'm very lucky to have had the experiences and the teachers, I'll say another thing, which again can sound arrogant, that I've always been quite intelligent, but there's something different than just raw computing intelligence. There's something else. And I've always been smart, but at this stage in my life, I'm not this smart. There's something going on where I feel that I'm being gifted or blessed, or, weird words, or you get it. But that feels really satisfying to feel that, I don't know. It's kind of like I don't like the word downloads, and I'm not a channeler, nothing about that. But I really do feel that there's some kind of goodness that is helping me with my thinking. And then that thinking is expressed in the technology. A lot of people ask, like, how do you know to do this stuff? Well, okay, I study a lot. I'm smart. I put in my work. But a lot of the solutions to how to do it, actually, I get while I'm doing it. So, man, Doug, what's that? To me, it's just a gift. I don't know.
Well, I like to look at it one where there you create your own luck. You've gone to university, you've studied, you've gone and studied these
No, wait. I rarely went to class. Let's be clear about that. Okay?
Well, after university, you said you went and you tried these other 3 different spiritual practices.
Well, yeah, but okay,
I also you paid the price there.
Well, I also I went back to college. I have other, degrees and specialties that I studied. So, the one that the 69, 70, 71, remarkably, I walked away with an undergraduate degree. I mean, remarkably.
You had the original training, though, for the goal for the Neurovizr, like all the psychedelic experiences. It's like,
well,
you learned something.
I don't even think it was that, Listen, I have to say, I can make up a story. It's probably partially true. I'm not trying to lie, but there's so much of this that it's kind of mysterious, or I'm at this point, I don't know, and I'm like, it's okay to not know something, and it's like, wow, there's a lot I just don't really know, and that's okay, that's okay. Anyway, blah blah blah. So,
yeah. And I like. And then the other part you said there, you were sort of talking about, as you just went along and started to do it, it started to happen and the information came. And for me personally, like my opinion, everyone else might disagree, I see that as at times intuition starting to work. And for my definition of intuition, for those listening, there's a benevolent force out there that is whoever, whatever it is, that likes us, wants to help us, and is at intervals in our life trying to get messages to us to help us and to help so that we can help others. So potentially, intuitively, sometimes on your, probably at least once on your journey to create the Neurovizr, you've tapped into something. Because like at your own admittance, and I'm hearing you say it, and I'm thinking, I'm agreeing. For me, I don't know much about anything, and the older I get, the less I know. And it's like, but things come, information comes from who knows where, and you act upon it, and something starts to come together. But you have to act, you have to do something. You just can't sit and have all the thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, let me spin on that, the intuition thing. I think that what we'll call the source is not something different than us. I think it's the combination of us. I think the combination of all of us lets all of us help each other in ways that are unexpected. I don't see it as a source outside of myself. I don't like it. I don't know. I don't believe in inside and outside. I don't believe in that concept. I think it's a false concept. And the, you know, I think when I, like you know, when I get like an idea, or let's even call it a solution, I think it's coming from Doug, or all the Dougs of the world, or all the, I heard, there's a funny thing. If you want to know, this is horrible, it's kind of a joke, but that, you know, if you want to understand the entire universe, it's really easy. Everything in the universe is either a duck or not a duck. And that covers it, right? Anyway, stupid joke. But the, yeah, this thing, intuition. I actually have a rather scientific and neurological perspective on this intuition thing. Yeah, I like science a lot. To me, science and spirituality is the same thing, different sides of the same coin. And I'll say it, okay, I'll introduce a concept called brain signal variability. Brain signal variability. Some people have heard about heart rate variability. The idea was, I'll make it short, because it applies to the brain, which applies to my view of intuition, and why I think the Neurovizr can help a person refine their intuition. Okay. Little story here. If a person has a heartbeat of 60, which is a little bit lower than conventional, people say 72. Let's say you have a heart rate of 60. Well, if that means that your heart beats 60 times a minute or once a second. So the assumption would be, well, then if it's 60, then it must beat once per second. And if that's true, you're probably about to have a heart attack. Because even if it is averaging 60 times per minute, the period or the time between each heartbeat must have some variation, which is a reflection of how your autonomic nervous system is adjusting to environmental and metabolic demands. So the heartbeat, the BPM, beats per minute, is an averaging. But now we realize, oh my God, between each beat is not the same amount of time. There is variability. And guess what? The more variability, the better off you are. Why? Because more variability shows that your system is really super responsive and adaptive to the fluctuating demands and changes going on in your body. So heart rate, oh my God, we've just been averaging out thinking that it's regular. Okay, so this variability. Our mechanical science likes regularity. For example, I have a car, you know, it's still a petrol car, and it has cylinders, and I want those cylinders to be pulsing at a very regular rate. I don't want to, no, I want to. So we made a mistake in applying the physics of mechanical concepts to organisms. And organisms are not machines. You know, we say the heart is a pump. Well, guess what? What pump do you want? If you're pumping water out of your basement, do you want that pump to, no, you want. So the heart as a pump must pump with irregularity that is adaptive. Like, oh, wait a minute. It's an easy metaphor to think in mechanical terms about our body, the organism, but that's not the way nature works. So if the heart is not a regular pump, it's an irregular pump, do you think our brain is a regular signal generator? Turns out, nope, that there is a lot of variability in brain signals. Oh, shit. So, you know, when we put the thing on the head and we get EEG, 12 hertz, 40 hertz, all these kinds of things, that number is a mathematical lie of convenience. It's averaging. So if it's 12 hertz that you're picking up, the information coming out of the brain electrically is like a volcano of frequencies. Some of them aren't even frequencies, they're aperiodic, they're not regular. So the hardware picks it up, and then the algorithm says, let's make this a little bit more simple, folks. So anything around about 12 hertz, we'll just average that out to 12 hertz. It might be 11.7632224. Like, how many decimal points are you going to consider? So, 12 hertz is kind of 12 hertz-ish. Just like the heartbeat is 60 beats a minute-ish. So this ability for our brain to sit in more ordered, repetitive, predictable patterns is really important. However, in that variability, it's also important that the brain opens up for more variations on this activity. So we can imagine that our brain is a 20-story building. You own the whole building. The lower floors are more ordered and predictable and repetitive because you've learned that. The higher floors are less ordered. They're more free. They have more liberty, so that they are less predictable, but they can work with surprise and novelty and uniqueness. And that building is our brain. And we have an elevator that goes up and down. Up and down. This thing that we call intuition is when we use the elevator to go to higher floors, where we give up logic, we give up simple cause and effect, we give up predictability, and we become more open to information processing that is less conventional, less predictable, less logical, less linguistic. And that brain, 20 floors, I'm making up the analogy, obviously, that's a healthy brain, that when the elevator can go up and down, according to when you need to go up and down.
So it's accessing what it needs at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So for men that are listening, and they're sort of like, they're saying, okay, Garnet, I'm coming on board here on that. It's probably a good idea for me to develop my intuition. I've just heard what you said. And I
Mm-hmm.
have heard about heart rate variability on my last medical checkup. The doctor had
Mm-hmm.
that as one of the markers, and I get that. So now we're talking about this brain variability.
Mm-hmm.
And so your neurovisor now, we're going to put that on. We're going to be subject to the flashing LED lights, to the sounds through the
Mm-hmm.
headphones.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going to tie in now to this variability? Is it going to create more variability? Is it
Mm-hmm.
simply creating variability by having it on? What's happening there?
Well, there are short-term effects and long-term effects. That's the first thing. So I'll make a statement that we can then unpack or unfold to answer your question. A brain that can change when change is required is a healthy brain. A brain that can change when change is required, that's a healthy brain. So the Neurovisor has a principle that I created a term because it is not brain entrainment. Entrainment is when a signal repeats over and over again without change, and the brain begins to resonate or entrain with that information. So it takes what the brain is doing and it brings it into a particular place and kind of holds it there. I call the Neurovisor process brain engagement, not entrainment, engagement, which is a term that comes out of neuroplastic methodologies where you have to grab the attention of the brain And with its attention, then you can begin to work into some kind of like a brain exercise. So the Neurovisr is a form of brain exercise that helps the brain make changes that are healthy changes so that you can move it up the elevator in the building or move it down the elevator in the building so that when it's a kind of, okay, this is again an image analogy. It's a little bit like yoga, where yoga helps you put your body in different positions that you don't normally go in, so that if you do need to move in a certain way, your body can do it because it's exercised to do it. Like I don't do many back bends. I have some, sports injuries over time and things. So my, I have to be careful about that. So a yoga posture would help me practice changing the curve of my spine so that when I do drop something, and this has actually happened, when I'm in the car and I drop something in, like the back seat, and I have to park, reach back to get the stupid thing and do it, and like, why? It's difficult. Why? Because I don't usually bend my back that way. So if you don't usually move up and down the elevator of order, well, that's, the lower floors, it's an analogy, it's an image, right? That the lower floors are more ordered, more practiced, more predictable. And the higher floors are more liberal, more free. So it's the relationship of usually what's called stability and flexibility. That our brain functions need to have a base of stability for a lot of repeated predictable actions, as well as the ability to be flexible and adaptive and changing. Now, if the habits, because the lower floor, that's what we call habits. And if it's too habituated, then that stability, that becomes rigidity. If you're stuck if the elevator won't go past the fourth floor, that degree of stability transfers as rigidity, the inability to change. And if you're in the upper floors and it's stuck and you're way up there by the penthouse and the helipad too much, that flexibility becomes volatility. So you don't want to have a brain that is changing in a volatile way. Neither do you want a brain that is cemented in rigidity, that you don't want to be in the basement or the heliport. First floor to the 20th floor of the penthouse, that's very good. So a loose analogy. So, like how do we exercise our brain's ability to leave order and explore flexibility, a bit of the hero's journey, hopefully gather something of value and then return back to the lower floors. But the order is now a higher order. It's a more informed order. So intuition to me does not mean that you jettison logical thinking. Intuition serves as a way of expanding the knowledge base that you then bring back into your logical way of thinking and analyzing. There are ways of knowing without thinking, but that doesn't mean you should not think. It's that your thinking becomes more refined, more elegant, more wise. So that 20-story building, that's you own the whole thing. Every floor has a purpose, and there's an elevator.
So you could go into a meditative practice one day because you're on level 3 and you meditate for 15 minutes and it takes you to level 7. You wander around there for 3 minutes and you notice something and there's some wonderful information, and you take that back down to the ground floor for the rest of the day. And the next day you've woken up at level 5 and you meditate, or you put the Neurovisr on, or you do Qigong, or your boxing training, whatever puts you into the flow. And you might go to level 12 doing boxing training or whatever, and you bring some information there back to level 4 and use it. Yeah, okay, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And so the Neurovisr would help oil the elevator, like to keep it to make it
That's right.
easier, and it's training you to which buttons to push on the elevator to get where you
Yeah.
want to go easier, quicker, smoother, without effort.
Yeah, and how to behave on that floor appropriately. If
Mm.
it's on the lower floor, maybe that's your accounting. If it's that's your accounting team. But on the upper floors, that's your R&D and innovation floors. Well, you interact with those floors according to the purpose they provide. Now, I'm going to take this one step further. It's a very interesting, I think, anyway. Um, if there are 20 floors, and that's your brain, one of those floors is your home. That's where you go, kick back, sleep, you know, that kind of thing. Because the whole building's your brain. What floor would be your residence from 1 to 20? This comes out, by the way, in neurology. This is the study of what's called criticality. Critic from physics is that point, that critical point, would say when water turns to ice, or ice to water, or water to steam. It's like something, and then boom, something changes. So it's called criticality, in case you hadn't heard it. And in this, and I'm going to ask you that question, like, what floor is your home? In neurology, that's called the sweet spot of criticality. It's a lovely term, right? The sweet spot of criticality. So on what floor is your sweet spot? What floor is your residence?
I'd like to think it's somewhere between 3 and 5, but yeah, and I don't
Okay,
even
I
know what I
know.
base that on.
Well, I know it's just we're having some fun here, right? That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
There's no right wrong answer. Okay, again, it's an analogy based on neurology, so I'm simplifying it into something you can easily imagine.
Mm.
The sweet spot of criticality, your residence in your 20-story brain, is in and around the 15th floor.
Wow. Okay.
Why? Because it's closer to the flexibility than it is the stability. So it's not on the 10th floor. You think, well, halfway would be pretty good. You chose something that is even more stable, more recognizable in the analogy. The idea is, and pardon me, in life, shit happens. That
Mm-hmm.
the environment has a series of very unpredictable experiences, sometimes challenges. And so does internal metabolism, although internally it's quite a lot more predictable than what's happening outside. So our brain is positioned in default to the ability to make quick changes. Why? Because survival depends upon it. You have to be able to respond quickly. So if you're down on the 4th floor, that is so habituated, so predictable, that it takes a long time for the elevator to get up to the 17th floor where it needs to respond to things.
Mm.
So this, and it's spoken about in so many spiritual traditions, the comfort of the unknown, this concept of living in grace, the openness to what can happen, is actually a neurological dynamic, And there are plenty of what I'll call techniques or processes that in theory should work, but they don't. You think, why? I mean, we know, here's all the reasons why it works. Here's all the things. Here are the people with success stories. Why doesn't it work for me? It's because there is an assumption that the habituation, that your sweet spot is open and able and willing enough to accept new experience, new process, newness, uniqueness, novelty, surprise. That's what learning is about. So many of us are actually stuck in habituated processes. Yep. Yeah.
I just put my hand up like me.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yes. But that's our that's the normal condition, because it seems to be a safe retreat into what you know.
Mm.
So I say sometimes, and I've given some lectures and papers and things like that, is how to unstick a stuck brain. Because, you know, like if you want to change means here is now, and it goes to that something has to let go. And when the brain, I'm not even talking psychologically here, I'm talking neurologically, when the brain is so habituated to certain aspects of information processing, it's hard. It's not like you're an I was going to say asshole. I wouldn't swear, but it's not like, you know, you're stupid. That like, well, like, why don't you just change that habit? Well, it's hard to change the habit, because every time I do it, it makes the habit more and more and more reinforced. Well, okay, so let's imagine that neurologically there's a kind of a glue, and that glue is the sediment of repeated habituation. So part of what the Neurovizr does, and other things, by the way, you've mentioned a few of them, the first thing they do before they get you to change is to soften the resistance to the change. You know, like if you're going to exercise, they say you should warm up before the exercise. Well, there is a kind of a neurological warming up that needs to happen in order for the habits to let go enough to begin to have the change. So, you know, baby steps, little bits of proof, qualities that are pleasurable, because change can be quite scary for us. There's some kind of feeling like, oh, what's going to happen? Well, good things can happen. So we have to be aware that there are techniques that work, should work by theory. And are we doing enough to soften the glue of habit so that the elevator, which has only been going between the first floor and the fifth floor, actually the cables are going to let you go beyond the seventh floor to the eighth, the 10th, you know, whatever it is. And this is why I'm going to give a quote, actually two quotes, from a brilliant scientist who's now, you know, departed from Earth, Gregory Bateson, an anthropologist, but just a poly thinker of all sorts. I struggled for a long time to understand what is information because of the technology that I work with. And he made it clear for me. He said two things related. He says, information is news of change. That if something is not changing, there's no news. Hey, you know, how's that new plant doing? Oh, it's fine, no change. So information is news of change. And then he went further to say, information is a difference that makes a difference. It's a difference that makes a difference. So call it variability, call it change, call it difference, call it learning, call it whatever, that this dynamic of being able to change from one thing to another is fundamental for everything. At the basic level, that's information. So the Neurovizr is kind of a clever or unique way of exercising the process of interacting with information. That's a little bit, you know, abstract, but the idea, you know, your theme focus with intuition, to me, has a strong neurological, a neuropsychological foundation. It isn't purely psychological or philosophical or, you know, esoteric. I do believe that it is the nature of our brain to have many ways of processing information. There are ways of knowing without thinking. Music is a great example. You don't have to be smart to make music and enjoy music. It's a whole different class. Why is it that people in advanced states of dementia and Alzheimer's that don't even know where they are or who in the hell you are can still remember the songs and play an instrument? Like, what is going on there?
Yeah.
So, yeah, knowing without thinking, intuition, as not a rejection of logic is what I see to be a good thing.
Right. So just you were talking there about, you know, dementia and things like that. Just it's very real for me at the moment. My mum's
Okay.
93. She's in a nursing
Mm.
home, physically very
Oh,
fit,
yeah.
and she's great. They don't have her in the dementia wing. That she's in a normal room. She's just
Mm-hmm.
extremely forgetful. Um,
Yes.
so let's go back to her 20-story building.
Yes.
What's working well there? What level's she hanging out on most of the time, and what levels is
Mm-hmm.
she struggling to get to?
Yeah. The out of a rather recent study from MIT, there is a discussion of all of this in the context of brain signal variability. We're going to be hearing a lot more about BSV in the same way that HRV has become interesting. Brain signal variability is make like 10 times more important. Okay, so the graph starts measuring 6 different executive functions. Executive means task functions of the brain in relation to brain signal variability. And it starts at, if a typical XY axis, if it starts here at like early childhood, the variability capacity increases on the average adult and peaks at its highest level of normal variability, meaning the elevator is going up and down and up and down and up and down. It isn't just up. The change of floors is the variability. It's not like higher floor, something like that. At around 45, it begins on a very predictable arc down. And they clocked it up to 90 years old, where at 90 years old, it's lower than even at the early stage of life. So,
Okay.
like, and that's just normal brain aging. In a dementia, that curve drops precipitously. So whenever that obstruction begins to occur, whatever the thing is, plaques or whatever, who knows, that thing goes conk. So the understanding in that model is that the aging brain, especially the pathological aging brain, is stuck on the low floors. And so much of memory involves kind of an analysis of past, present, and future. You know, we connect the dots. We make up a story. So the premise is that there is a loss of BSV. And that's consequently reflected in certain brainwave states as well. I'm going to introduce 2 words here, a little bit technical, but they're quite significant. These words can be used outside of neurology and pathology, so I don't want to equate them. But the brain that is habituated to the low floors, meaning less variability, that behavior is called autistic. And the brains that are habituated to higher floors where there's more volatility beyond flexibility, that's called schizotypic. Schizotypic, autistic. Schizophrenia, autism are pathological terms that are derivative of this neurological language. So
Just to clarify that, the second one you said there, they're stuck on the higher floors.
yes, yeah,
Right. Yep.
it's a wild world, and psychedelics move the brain functions up into this what's called high brain entropy, for periods of time. those high floors are really, really, really good and important. The lower floors are really, really good and important. It's the accessibility on demand that is the thing. If you spend too much time too high or too low, that's really not good. That's really not good. You know, there's a brain model called the predictive coding brain model, and there's this thing called the free energy principle. You know, these are the things I won't go into now that I study, and a lot of the Neurovizr is scientifically based on this neurology. But when it comes right down to it, it's just this the beauty of complementary states, and that it's also the hero's journey. When you leave what you know and you go into the so-called underworld, the dark unconscious aspects, and you have challenges, and then you find something there, and then you bring it back to the upper world, and that you use it as, you know, it's the mythology and even the story. This is a big deal, in my opinion. The way that we tell stories, because as a species with our intellect, the human being is a storytelling animal. We have this ability to create a past memory, even though we mythologize it. We can fantasize a future. Neither of those things are happening in the moment, but intellectually we can create that. So the reason the stories are the way they are, the reason our psychology is the way it is because of the way of our neurology. Our neurology behaves in a certain way with our complex brain that we have a psychological expression, how we tell a story, what makes a story, how we mythologize our own life is because of the bottom up and top down information processing of our neurology. So to have ways of understanding, like to call it intuition, there is now enough information that we can describe that in a neurological process. And if it's neurological, then we can make tools that either measure that or stimulate that, knowing that we have that innate capacity. Our brain is made to move from the mundane into the special and back to the mundane again. To go from ordinary to extraordinary and return to ordinary. Our brain is designed to do that.
And in a very short amount of time, I presume.
Short or long. The psychedelics, once you ingest it, the chemicals have a time period for processing. You can do meditations or, cold plunge, or there's so many ways to get in the elevator. And generally speaking, this is a generality. It's not good to spend too much time in the highest floors of the building. However, that is your building, and those floors are there for a purpose.
Yeah, you're bringing back some memories now, and it's probably why I said I'm thinking I'm living at level 3 to 5, because
Yeah.
when I was 14, I got stuck at level 20 for 8 hours.
Wow, how'd that happen?
Well, one of my brothers lived on a farm and he wasn't
Uh-huh.
home, and he had
Yeah.
mentioned there was some gold top mushrooms there. And so I went up, I got on my motorbike and I rode there through the bush tracks,
Yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
one Saturday, and I picked some and the stems went sort of blue, and
Oh, you got blues. Oh.
yeah, and I boiled them up. I boiled them up, and I got a tea bag and I put in and I drank it all down, and
Yeah.
absolutely nothing happened. And I'm like, oh, these things don't do anything. So I
Yeah.
go home. The next Saturday I come back, same thing. Nobody else
Yeah.
is there, and
Mm.
I, I go in and I picked them. And when I opened the stems this time, they weren't
Yeah.
just blue; they were extremely dark purple, like they'd matured through the
Yeah.
week. And I thought,
And they
great.
had. Yeah. Yeah.
So I put some more in, and this time I got the potato masher, and while it was in the boiling water, and I'm mashing them very, very hard, because last week
You're
I had
how
zero,
old at this? You're
14,
14?
and I'm on
Cool.
my own, and it's probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon or a bit later,
Yeah.
maybe 4, and I drink down that thing. And now my brother was renting this property, and he'd converted the barn into his
Yeah.
house, and you know,
Okay.
it just had this rusty corrugated iron roof, you
Yeah.
know, that you looked up at, and I don't know if it's kept the rain out. And before long, I'm laying on his bed, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And I literally thought I am going to
Uh-huh.
be put into a mental hospital for the rest of my life. I could never
Uh,
see myself leaving level 20. And those
yep.
8 hours seemed like 80
Forever.
years.
Yeah.
It was horrid. Yeah, I've smoked weed and stuff since,
Yeah.
and all sorts of things, but I've never touched
Yeah.
mushrooms again.
Hmm.
I've just, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
burnt me hard. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, there you go. You know, the interesting thing is that effect was not from the mushrooms. That the mushrooms enabled a certain feature in your brain to activate. Okay, I mean that's really to the okay. The um, Stan Grof, you know, Stanislav Grof, quite famous psychologist, holotropic breathing. Before illegality, he was one of the leading researchers in psychedelic compounds. Brilliant man. And he describes psychedelics, including these mushrooms, as non-specific brain amplifiers.
So they amplify, right?
Brain amplifiers. I also study in the field of neuroanthropology, which is a rather new discipline. And they very elegantly propose, in terms of neurological function, what they call neurognostic structures. Gnostic, like Gnosticism, mystical knowledge, neurognostic structures that the brain has an innate capacity, because there are plenty of people that have quite extraordinary experiences of that type, more or less, without psychedelic compounds. And they say, well, that's because there's DMT in your brain. There's a lot of unknowns right now. And because we think in terms of biochemistry a lot and not so much in biophysics, we try to make up. Anyway, the point is that as challenging as that was, it still is reasonable and understandable. And it can make a fear, maybe why, you know, the lower floors seem to be attractive, because the higher floors appear to be quite risky. But guess what? That's our brain. That's our brain. And that ability is precious. It's precious. So, yeah, um, there's so much beauty to be discovered. And, you know, we have, everybody has a challenging life, more or less, some horribly challenging, some not. And however a person can change when change is required, because one thing they say, the only constant is change. So we can either resist that truth or learn how to surf that wave. And in good part, that is the intent and the technical design in the Neurovizr, is to help the brain in a controlled fashion. It has an on and off button, you know.
And
Uh,
I think that's why I'm attracted to it, because you
yeah,
know, like you watch it and it's like, okay, if you don't like it, you just lift it off and it's over. Like,
yeah,
boom, it's yeah, and yeah, I think
yeah.
that's my and like I think I'd love to go back to level 20 again, but
Of course you would.
in a way, I know that if I
Yeah,
chose to, I could
yeah, yeah,
kick back to level 10
yeah,
if I wanted to, you know, like,
yeah,
and the
yeah,
Neurovisor gives me that, because I've had experiences with the Neurovisor and with other similar
yeah.
technology like that,
Sure.
some older stuff that was very, very expensive, nothing like you can personalize like the Neurovisor. And
Yeah,
I have had some, you know, extreme things where I have gone to way up there.
yeah.
But completely fear free, because I
Mm-hmm.
knew you know, it felt in control. It was
Mm-hmm.
it was very different. It wasn't normal. It was
Mm-hmm.
exhilarating, but yeah, I had the peace of
Okay.
mind that if it got
Yeah.
weird, I could pull out.
Yeah. Well, I don't like the term altered states.
Hmm.
Altered, and both of those things, I think, paint an incorrect picture. And it was, Charles Tart, I think out of Stanford, that coined the term altered states back in whatever, 68 or something, I forget. But that I prefer ordinary and extraordinary, because these are ordinary states, although you don't normally have them in the flow of average experience. They're extraordinary. I think what I conceptualize is the concept of psychoactive agent, an agent that will activate the mind. Just, psychoactive. Okay, I don't mean psychedelic. Psychedelics, I'll say it this way. All psychedelic compounds are psychoactive agents, but not all psychoactive agents are psychedelic compounds. So to activate the mind, to move when you want the elevator to go up, an agent can activate the brain to do that, a psychoactive agent. The Neurovizr is an example of a psychoactivating technology. It activates the brain to make dynamic changes on a certain vector or a certain probability theme. Cool. So there are two psychoactive agents that completely fascinate me. One is what we call humor. Funny. When something is funny, you shift from an ordinary to an extraordinary state. I mean, if you've had the great good fortune to laugh your ass off, as the saying goes, belly laughs, that is not an ordinary state. It is an exalted fantasy and fantastic delight. It's so delightful, right? It's so delightful. Funny. So I studied humor, like what's going on here? And the definition that I love, which fits into predictive brain coding and all these neurological things that I'm involved in, is humor is a benign violation of expectation. The punchline, the joke takes you where you think you're going and you violate that expectation, but it's benign, it's not hurtful. And what happens? More than a giggle or a smile, so it is sometimes an almost drug-like state of delight and euphoria. Wow, that is part of our normal brain ability to experience humor.
So can you develop a device that helps us get into belly roll laughing? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
like, that would
yes,
be
of course.
fantastic.
Well, it's the same thing, that it's this thing where a person is not so harbored in habitual predictability and patterns, that they're willing to have their pattern violated. Their expectation is violated. That's why if you can get somebody that has a pole up their ass, pardon me, and if you can get them to crack a smile, you're winning. Why? Because that stability, that rigidity is loosening up, so that I actually got a laugh out of that bastard, somebody would say, right?
Yeah.
So humor, the benign violation of expectation, it's a dehabituating psychological remedy. That's why they say, old books, Norman Cousins and so on, laughter is the best medicine. Why? Because it takes the elevator up into unpredictable discovery of different states and points of view. Okay, what is the other psychoactive agent? I think the king or queen, the royal psychoactive agent of all, is a particular state of consciousness that we call attention. Attention. This thing that we call this state, this conscious dynamic, this tool that we call attention, is the most powerful, most fundamental psychoactive agent. That thing that can help the mind shift, help the brain shift in variability of information processing. When you think of it, what do pain and pleasure have in common?
Oh, good question. They're going to stir emotions. They're going to, yeah, good question.
Okay, well, I'll give you my rather stupid example. Right now, if I was with you, and if I had like an ice pick or a dagger, a sharp knife, and I began to jam it several times into your left knee,
Mm-hmm.
I assume it would be very painful.
Yes, it would. I would not enjoy it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, oddly, and somehow, without being rude, somehow in your left knee, you had an gloriously pleasurable orgasm in your left knee. I don't know how. I would say that would be a lot of pleasure in your left knee.
Yep.
So what does that dagger and that orgasm have in common with your left knee?
They're definitely going to draw my attention to that left knee.
Bow. In both cases, your attention goes to your left knee.
Yeah, forget about my right knee. Yep.
What right knee?
Yeah.
Left knee. So why does that happen? What is so important about this thing we call attention? That's why the Neurovizr is a brain engagement process. There are 3 stages, actually. I won't go further, but there's engage, enrich, enjoy. This lovely engage, enrich, enjoy is actually a 3-stage aspect of our neuroplastic process. This is how our neurology works. And if you can go into any process at all, combine engage, enrich, enjoy, attention with the elevator concept, like a lot of techniques start to make sense really quickly.
Yeah, no, I've loved that analogy that you've given with the 20-story building. It just helps. It helps me with my experience as a 14-year-old with those mushrooms and to realize, yeah, what was going on. That I just had no concept the elevator would come back down. That was yeah. And
well, there are pathologies where it's hard to get the elevator down, and that's why Groff. I'm going back to his definition of a psychedelic. It's a non-specific brain amplifier. The non-specificity is the issue. That's why back in the day, the concept of set and setting were so important, because the psychedelic had no agenda. It's non-specific. It's going to amplify whatever's happening in the brain. So the set would be your psychological and informed state. The setting is where you are and who you're with. So that's why it holds promise in a structured form in psychedelic-assisted therapy, and is not considered good for an unattended, novice 14-year-old boy in some barn somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
Alone.
No,
yeah.
Alone. Yeah. I'm lucky. I love doing psychedelics when I did them. I love doing them alone. It was always fantastic for me. I even have a weird, I'm not claiming this to be like, well, I sometimes think, I hope I experience dying the way I experience getting off on acid. Yeah. Because I was so delighted by the adventure of it. It was so, I felt so joyous. It would be like a young boy finally getting to have sex. It's just like, oh, the expectation is just so happy. Yeah. So happy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Have you ever read any of the Jane Roberts books on Seth?
Yeah. And the education of Oversoul 7 and all of that.
Yes, the Oversoul 7 book, where she talks about the old people in the nursing home dribbling in their wheelchairs, but in their in their minds, they've left their bodies and they're flying around the nursing home. Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I'm a conservative, a dubious conservative about a lot of the channeled mediumship.
Hmm.
I'm more of a classic guy. That's why I followed traditional spiritual traditions
Yeah, yeah,
the way I did. I
yeah,
don't know. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And that was a fictional book, and I just found it interesting that
No,
because
that
the
was
others were channeled. Yeah,
I totally remember
yeah.
it, and I was fascinated by in multi-layered, in overlapping
Mm.
lifetimes and the oversoul and all of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
know
The
when I
whole
first read it, it was eye-opening for me, and it was like, wow, that's an interesting way to look at things. Just
yes,
it just
yes.
opened my mind to,
Me too. Me
yeah,
too.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, I was raised a Roman Catholic, so I was, branded with this good guy, bad guy, us and them mentality, which has not served me well. And so maybe it's the reason why I kind of retreat into more classic processes. Yeah, I mean, even though, I was quite liberal in my psychedelic experience. I don't know.
yeah,
We try to make sense of our life, and it's not even really a story. I don't know what it is, just what happens.
yeah. I
Yeah.
was raised in the church myself, and it's very much good, evil, heaven,
Yeah.
hell. Like there
Yeah.
was no black and white, and I had my teenage years where I 13, 14, where I strayed away and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. But
Straight away.
yeah,
Found freedom, you could say. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But then
Okay.
when I hit 20, I went back to it for another 10
Really?
plus years
Okay.
at my own free will, without mum dragging me along. And
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But in saying that, and mum was raised in a Catholic orphanage like till she was
Wow.
16, and then she went to
Wow.
church like every day of her life till she moved into the
Sure.
nursing home. But
Wow.
she
Wow. Wow.
she she got me onto um the word conspiracy theories is wrong, but she was the one who started taking me to I thought we were going to a church meeting one night when I was about
Uh-huh.
13 or 14, and it was that guy Eric von someone or other with Chariots of the Gods.
Oh,
That
that, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. He
yeah,
came to our town, and I don't know. Mum had heard about it through
yeah.
someone at church, and so we turned up at this ballroom of this hotel, and I'm thinking, oh, here we
Uh-huh.
go, another church guy. Like this will be, and this guy's talking about sunspot activity with charts up on the walls, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is a long time. This is 45 years ago more, and I'm
Uh-huh.
like,
Uh-huh.
what is all this stuff? And then there was other stuff mum would get into too. And she's extremely conservative, like very much
Mm-hmm.
black and white with
Yeah.
Christianity. But she did have these little inklings. She would go off and she'd drag me into it as well. And I think she was the one who started me on this
Uh,
path away from that to there was other things around. Although
okay.
I was never game to discuss it with her because she was still like even now she sits in the nursing home,
Well.
she goes, Jesus, when are you taking me out of here? Like, hurry up. It used to
Well,
be
it's
very
pretty clear.
polite. Now she's getting a little bit slightly abrupt. It's like, hurry
Yeah.
up.
Well.
Yeah.
Well. Okay. Um, One way or another, we'll all, you know, be a willing or unwilling participant in that experiment. Uh,
Yeah. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I think I was with my dad nearly 3 years ago when he passed. He was in the nursing home,
Okay.
and
Wow.
you could actually there was four of us in the room when he went,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you could tell there was a change in the room, and
Sure.
it was the first time I'd been with anyone when they went, and
Okay.
he'd been like asleep, whatever for like 12
Mm.
hours, so there was no
Wow.
sudden, I'm really not moving or anything. But afterwards, my wife checked in with me a couple of hours later, and she said, "How are you going?" And so I said, "Yeah, I think I'm doing okay." And I
Mm-hmm.
said to her, "How are you doing?" And she said, well, and my dad was he used to drink a lot, and he was a bit scary to
Mm-hmm.
be around at times. And she was always
Mm-hmm.
a little. If he was sober, she loved him, but
Mm-hmm.
when he was drinking, which was more than most of the time, she was always a bit scared of him. And she said, you know what? she goes, I felt privileged to be in the room when he went.
Mm,
She said it was, and I said, yeah, it was, it just lifted. It was,
mm-hmm,
and so I'm not in a hurry for my mum to go, but I do
mm-hmm,
want to be there when she goes, if at all possible. Like it's just, it was
mm-hmm.
because prior to that, in our Western world, we're always taught, death's a scary thing. You just stay, you let
Yeah.
the undertaker handle all that, or the doctor or the nurse, and you leave. You don't be there when that happens. But
Mm-hmm.
with the experience we had with Dad, it was like, wow,
Yeah.
like it was a very privileged place to be when he
Yeah.
transitioned. Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
paraphrase something that by memory I'd heard the Dalai Lama say when he was asked about meditating. And he said that, yes, he meditates, that he practices dying every day.
Mm, it's
I
beautiful.
thought, whoa, that kind of letting go, to practice it,
Mm,
practice letting go. I
yeah.
have a thought, which may be closer to a closing thought, that I have an idea that I think there are three things that every human being should be a part of, to do. I think one is they should be, of course, as a man, we can only be it, but to be a part of somebody's birth, to witness a birth. If we're a woman, of course, to give birth, but to be involved in the birth of a human, and if not, at least of an animal, but to be a part of birth, to share somebody's death. And this one is a little controversial. I think to do at least one human dissection.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. My daughter's unique, I'm happy to say. Uh, we've, because of our lifestyle, the gift for her 18th birthday is that together we did a week-long human dissection.
Wow.
That was her 18th birthday.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you went along to like a hospital or somewhere, or?
Yeah. There was a circumstance you could pay
Mm,
for it,
yeah.
and it was all legal. We didn't do it like
Yes.
in the graveyard or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that experience of uh, you know manipulating and inspecting the
Mm,
human body
mm.
until you take it all apart is, boy, that is a provocative psychoactive agency.
Wow. I remember probably 10 plus years ago, no, probably closer to 15 years ago, we went to Vegas and they had a display there of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
human
the muscle
human
stuff.
body.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah. We went through that for a couple of hours walking around, and that
it's
was quite,
pretty
yeah, it was,
pretty
like,
powerful.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, yeah, nothing like what you'd done, but I guess the
Well, it's
closest
kind of,
thing you could do. Yeah,
yeah, no, nothing like it, but there's some similarities. I know what
yeah,
you're talking about,
yeah. You could
and
see it, or you couldn't touch it, but you could see it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
I
there was
tell
a
you,
lot of,
when it's
yeah, a lot of
yeah,
medical students there taking
well,
notes.
sure,
It was
yeah,
great
yeah,
because
yeah, sure,
they could turn around the displays. They could see every angle and up and down
yeah,
and in, and it
yeah,
was,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it was
yeah,
very innovative and
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
interesting.
All right.
All right,
Okay, all
I'll
right.
have your contact details and all that sort of thing, how people
Mhm.
can find out about the Neurovisor, etc., in the
Thank you.
show notes. Is there
Okay.
anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about before we finish up?
Well, there's probably 30 or 40 things, but no, we're okay right now. I love the topic because to me it's from any kind of different perspective. It's the topic of life. It's the topic of us being here. Uh, I have a kind of a philosophical filing cabinet, and this one drawer is so big with notes. I called it Life on Earth. The the things that go on, because I assume that there's life in other places, different dimensions and locations, but life on Earth is like this. And yeah, try to be, to your best, a good person and do some good things.
Yeah,
It just all swings back to that for me.
yeah.
So the time with you right now is a very comfortable, looks like an hour and a half, and I thank you for the chance to talk, and happy to do it.
Yeah, I thank you for the clarity that you've been able to bring to me. So I know you've brought it to the viewers as well for how our brain works. That 20-story analogy for me, for how I think, was awesome. It really, yeah. And so I guess after we close off here, I'll be starting to think, why do I think I should be living? Why is my home between the third and fifth level? Like, yeah. So it's great food for thought for me. I've loved it. Thank you very much, Garnet.
Well, by the way, the building not only has an elevator, it has a staircase. So, if you're afraid to get in the elevator, you can go.
If there's a power failure, you still can go up and down.
Well, no, it's just that you're in the elevator. There's still some amount of surrender to the elevator. Well, you can use the staircase, and you can go step by step. One floor to the other. Don't worry. It's all good.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, my friend. All my best from northern Thailand.
Yep.
Take care.
Down here into Australia. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Adios. Bye-bye.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.